Hey everyone, David here with another Arcadian Rift devlog. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise going on, but anyway, we just jump right in. This month I started working on things like the holotable. The holotable was something I've been meaning to kind of redo, but it was kind of a while before I thought that I would actually need to start having all the, like the different stuff that can make the player a little more usable to get the stuff they need. But anyway, I started making this holotable. Okay, anyway, hey everyone, David here, another Arcadian Rift devlog, sci-fi FPS game I'm working on in Unreal Engine. A bit of a shorter devlog this episode, but before we jump into the month in review, I do want to mention I'm currently looking for a concept artist or two, specifically for people with experience doing kind of like sci-fi robotic type enemies or characters, as well as sci-fi environments such as like space stations, spaceships, and kind of industrial spaces. All of the information will be in the description, so definitely check it out if you're interested in doing some paid concept artwork. Anyway, back to the update. Things began once again with bug fixing and feedback from the monthly testing, which once again resulted in a huge massive list of improvements and tweaks to make the game more fun, more functional, but a few of the notable ones are the Squall kind of slow pistol had a huge rework. A bit of the feedback involved this weapon not really being useful, and most people, including myself, just tended to ignore it. Previously, the weapon would slow enemy movement for 8 second singular. However, enemies like the turrets, don't move at all. The tanks don't move while they're being attacked, and things like the mines just get shot in one hit and blow up anyway. So the change to this weapon involved adding the functionality to slow down the enemy rate of fire in addition to the speed. This made slowing turrets, actually effective, and the weapon overall just much more useful. The Leviathan also had a ton of improvements based on feedback. It's overall just a lot more reliable, responsive to the player, and it's no longer targeting like the wrong enemies, gets stuck going in circles, or shoots at like a nearby wall. The shotgun now has actual damage fall off, instead of just trying to kind of rely on the bullet spread. This meant that I was actually able to decrease the spread of the shot, making it a little more accurate and satisfying overall, but still keeping it balanced with the fall off. And the cargo crates now have been given an effect when you destroy them now, so they don't just kind of poof out of existence. There's like chunks of metal and smoke that kind of puffs out a little bit, just makes it look a little better. After all that was done, I thought it was time to finally finalize the story, and this is what took most of the— oh god, it's back! Oh god, no! I'm okay, no, just kidding. After all that was done, I thought it was finally time to finalize the story, and this is what took most of the month, and I can't really show much from any of it. To me, story is huge, and we did write up like a story, back at the start of the project. However, we specifically designed both the story and the game, the whole game design and everything, to be flexible, because I didn't know like what I'd be capable of creating when I started the project. I didn't know what would be fun or what would get cut, or if I just came up with better ideas in the future. I went back to look at the story, spent time with my musician and my writer for my previous work, and we brainstormed up, just a lot of new ideas that we've been thinking of since writing the original story. The amount of notes and stuff I wrote down is massive. I'll put a thing on the screen, but obviously I'll have to kind of blur it for spoiler reasons. Overall, I think the story is definitely more interesting and has a lot more kind of dramatic or cinematic moments, whereas previously there were only really like one at the beginning and maybe kind of one at the end. However, it is a bit more ambitious, and why I'm going to need some help with concept art, and eventually I'm probably going to need to bring on some modelers and maybe a few other people just to help kind of finalize all the art near the end of the project. So once I felt the new story was all figured out, I got back to development, but decided to focus a bit less on the kind of fun, quick feature stuff, and more on some of the large design areas which were needed to have the functioning game. I began by giving the holotable the update I mentioned I was going to give it a while back, and to support the story stuff. I designed the new scanner in Inkscape first, and made it so the player can spin this little, scan thing around, and by pressing left or right mouse button they can change the cone angle, and by tweaking the angle and rotating it, they'll start to get this kind of visual signal at the top of the radar, and eventually there'll be, of course, sounds that'll help even more, so they can kind of uncover ships to board. I really wanted to make sure the player could feel the actual process of being the pirate and scanning for ships themselves, rather than just kind of being presented with a list of missions, like in most games. While doing this, I figured out a much better and more reliable way of doing the interaction with the 3D objects by using on mouse over or something like that. It's one of the events that just comes standard instead of this weird janky way I had done it before, where I was trying to basically code my own interaction system, not knowing that there's already kind of some way that handles this. However, this took a lot of testing and troubleshooting, as the new system was something I just hadn't used before. I kept running into those kind of bugs that would take like 5 hours before finally you're like, oh, this was the only thing that was off or something, and none of the posts online were solving your problem. Next was the weapon wall, and using the same way I worked with the holo table, I was able to basically redo the whole weapon wall in a much better manner. One of the other big changes I made this month was redesigning the loot, and there were a few reasons I made this decision. Firstly, I was thinking about just how much time it's going to take to make all the different loot models and make all the different designs, and how much time I would save if I didn't have to make a whole bunch of loot models and different designs. Secondly, even if I did make all those custom models, it just kind of ends up being something the player's just gonna like grab and run away from. They're not even really gonna notice or care what they're grabbing, because it's just kind of like it's the money. It's not something that players can make, oh wow, I got this thing versus that thing. It's at the end of the day, it's just a number that you get. And finally, I was noticing that the finalized story, the actual process of pirating isn't really the main focus of the story or the game anymore. It's definitely, a huge part of it, and you still are the space pirate doing space party stuff, but it's not the main thing. So I figured I just, do it like other games where, like, you do the mission for the sake of doing the missions, and then there's also crates on the side that you grab and, grab money stuff from, just like in Skyrim, you're in a dungeon, you're going to fight the boss thing at the end, but along the way you can stop and open urns and grab some extra coins. In the end, I actually like the look of the new ones a lot more. I find it a little more satisfying and readable for the player to identify, and now I've saved myself a bunch of time not having to do something that probably wouldn't have been that useful to the player anyway. Next up, loading screens. Another big piece of the puzzle, which had been kind of temped in quickly in the past. This began by creating the cinematic for the boarding pod flying towards the destination ship that you're pirating, and this has been kind of my first and only time using any of the UE4 cinematic features, but it's actually kind of exciting to be working on a somewhat cinematic level once again. And I needed the game to have, an actual loading screen that could show, like, they could load this actual level while loading the other level and show, like, loading progress and not just kind of freeze every time the player starts a mission, which is what happens when you normally just open a level in UE4, because it actually runs on the main thread. And while watching tutorials, I was surprised to see how many videos were just like, throw up an image and call it a day, that way you won't notice it's frozen or something. But I was, I wanted an actual loading screen like games have, with some movement and like a spinner, so the player knows, oh, the game isn't like frozen here or something. This involved really redesigning the way I do all my levels, so I could stream in the empty persistent level first, then play the deployment sequence, then load the exterior, then load the interior off of the main thread but don't show it, then finally show it after the loading sequence has faded to black, and then you can't see it like pop in and whatever. And it was kind of a process to get that working, but I think it works pretty well now. Next, I did a little update to all my AI, where I put them to sleep if they happen to be really far from the player, which actually improved frame rate quite drastically. Sorry, it's kind of early. And by early I mean 1 p.m., which actually improved frame rate quite a bit when having large amounts of enemies in the level. I added a Y-splitter piece for the puzzle, for the kind of laser puzzle things, so I can start adding some complexity to the puzzle. However, I realized I'm also going to need to kind of redo the way things get charged up or receive the energy, as it's not as complex as I thought it was going to be, as currently I realize the solution's kind of always the same. When you have a splitter, you just put another single next to it and put them... It's not really... I'll work on it. We'll get some fun puzzles with this eventually. I enjoy this kind of thing. Getting near the end of the month, in preparation for the next round of testing, I had to put actual collision on the player ship, as previously I had just kind of had some temporary floor colliders for myself, but I needed to make it so that players wouldn't, fall out of the world. And that brings me to the end of the month, the next round of testing. The new goal is to make the testing builds be the same as the actual game, with the player ship, the scanning, the weapon walls, and all the loadouts and the ability to deploy to various levels. In the last builds, it was like I had to do these extra kind of patchwork things for the purpose of the testing levels. But from now on, all the stuff I'm fixing or implementing is stuff that will be 100% needed or helpful for the final game. On top of that, part of the new process for doing the testing is to have myself run through it a bit and make as many of the kind of quick changes before doing testing. What I was finding from the last few rounds of testing was that I would develop all month, not really getting a full playthrough of anything. Then suddenly when giving out to testers, there'd be a lot of just kind of basic bugs or little things like, whoops, I forgot to turn that thing back on, or whoops, I forgot to fix that little thing. Just little 10-second fixes. But then all these bugs would end up kind of slowing down the testers because they would, sometimes be kind of game or experience breaking. So just by spending a little bit of time myself, identifying and fixing these bugs, it makes it easier for the testers to play, give good feedback, which in turn is just more helpful overall. And that's it for this month. I got a few directions I could go for next month, but it's mostly going to be creating the blockouts for the story missions and figuring out exactly how those will play out, making them fun, designing any of the kind of unique mechanics for each of the missions, which I'm trying to make sure each of the kind of main missions have something to keep it a little different so the game doesn't feel kind of like, go here, kill robots, go here, kill robots. And make sure each mission has at least some kind of mechanics or something to make it a little different. But that'll be kind of my plan, I guess, for a little while now, actually, making all those levels and stuff. As always, big thanks to all my patrons who are supporting my work. I wish I had more to show this month, but I think the story is something that's super important and definitely something that deserves a lot of attention and care. And while you may not see much yet, I think eventually when you do start seeing story stuff, it'll be like, whoa, that's really cool. I'm glad there's a little more story to this game and it's not just like a loot, shoot, grab and stuff. Also, I want to extend an additional thanks to the patrons who have been kind of playing and testing the builds and leaving feedback. The feedback, whether it's just reporting bugs or commenting on game balance, has been insanely helpful. It's been literally the amount of changes I've been making based on that. It's like, in just like a day I go through, boom, knock out so many things, make the game so much better. So thank you everyone who's been leaving the feedback stuff. And of course, finally, thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget about the concept artist position in the description. And I am still working on those little game talk things, actually, I was mentioning a few devlogs ago. However, there's kind of something unrelated to that. This is kind of last minute going off the script sort of stuff, but I did start those little dev talk things where I was going to kind of like discuss different game designy things from other games. However, I actually ran into a problem with that as well, is that writing up the stuff was easy, but then finding footage was not. I was like, oh man, I want to talk about this one little thing in this game that I haven't played in, 4 years and I don't have any footage from it. Do I go on the web and steal random footage or something? So I kind of put those on pause for a moment. Eventually, I'm actually going to probably be looking for people who kind of just play a lot of games, have OBS, and can record a lot of footage. And I really might need help eventually just like getting footage from people. If anyone wants to just kind of, that might be more of a kind of just volunteer thing later. If people just, oh, I have some footage of recorded stuff, here, I'll send it to you. Then I can put those videos together. Otherwise, that's the main holdup on those, is that I just don't have a good way of getting all these like clips from different games. Sometimes I'll be like talking about one game, but I want to compare it to another game just really briefly. I only need like a 5-second clip, but then I have to go like load up the whole other game, maybe get 10 hours in the game to get one clip. It's just doesn't make sense to be doing that right now. It just seems like a lot of time investment. So that's why those haven't released yet. But I do have a lot of them written up. It's just, yeah, that's the holdup. But I'm not specifically recruiting for that just yet. But keep that in mind. If that interests you, maybe just kind of let me know. And maybe if there's enough interest for that, maybe at next devlog I'll kind of ask around, see if anyone's interested in kind of contributing to that. It's really just contributing footage and stuff. Anyway, so now that's it. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again next month. Goodbye. Goodbye.